So this is just going to be a little bit of a rambly video. I'm just going to talk about how I'm doing and how my book is going, the third book in my series, because it's going okay. But this book has been really hard to write, and I just want to share a little bit about that in case anybody else has been going through something like this, and just so you know that you're not alone, because I have written 5 books up to this point, and I am still seeming to be struggling. I went into this book thinking that it was going to be easy and that I had my process down because I'd already written 2 books in the series, and I was able to write my final draft of The Whisper in like a month and a half, and everything just clicked, and I felt good about my chapters most days. And this one has been very difficult. But before we get into that, hi, my name is Claire Fraze, and I am an award-winning young adult author who doesn't usually make videos like this on this channel, but rather makes craft videos, sharing the actionable writing tips that helped me make my own writing better. I am the author of young adult supernatural thriller They Stay, and the sequel They Whisper, and of the first half of the third book, They Return, which I will be talking about today. So I guess we can just dive right into it. I've been trying to wear nicer tops when I've been filming to appear more professional in these YouTube videos, but this is a pretty casual video, so I am opting for my casual tee and my iced coffee from this morning. It is currently 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm still drinking a cup of coffee from this morning, but I put it in the fridge and put ice cubes in it because now it's iced coffee from this morning. It's got a whole new life. And this is my favorite mug. I don't know if you can see. It might be a little blurry. It says this is what a published author looks like, which I thought would be kind of fitting. This is what a published author looks like. Sometimes. Because sometimes writing is really hard. So I started writing this draft in March. I created my first outlines in March, and I decided for this book that I was going to outline the crap out of it. I was going to outline every single chapter in detail. I did all of my creative brainstorming. I came up with all sorts of crazy subplots, and I was feeling really, really good about it in about March or so, I think. I was really excited. I'd never outlined a book in so much detail. My outline alone was somewhere around 20,000 words long. It was a little bit more, I think, like 22,000 words. It was very excessive. I had certain chapters that I had 3-page outlines just for that one chapter. They were incredibly detailed. But by the end of writing that outline, I felt like I was in a good place and I had a strong idea of what I wanted the book to look like. I then sent my outline to my editor. We worked on it chapter by chapter, and he gave me his feedback and gave me some ideas and told me things that didn't really make any sense and that weren't working, which was super helpful. And I then proceeded to start writing the book after I'd already talked to my editor about the chapters and got some preliminary ideas out of the way. I started writing chapter 1 and almost immediately found it so impossibly hard to write chapter 1. Oh, also, this coincided with me finding an author mentor to work with who was super helpful and very knowledgeable about the traditional publishing industry, and I wanted to work with her on my character voices and general prose because she gave me some feedback and gave me some ideas for different ways that I can improve. So I started working with her and sent her some samples from this manuscript. And because I really wanted to start working on character voice, because I felt like I had a generally okay grasp of it, and I thought I was doing the right thing, but she gave me some feedback that made me realize that actually I could be doing more, and all of the rules that I'd come up with for myself, like all of the different Shiloh talks like this, and Miles talks like this, and Jonah talks like this, academically differentiated the voices, but I couldn't hear the voices in my head. Like, I wasn't able to read a sentence back and then say, oh, actually, Jonah would never say it like that. So I wanted to be able to do that. So I spent a lot of time digging into the character voices, and I got like 3 to 5 comp characters in TV shows for each of my main characters, and listened to YouTube clips of those characters speaking a lot until I was able to read some prose and be like, oh no, that character in that TV show wouldn't say it like that. And how would that character in that TV show say it? And start training my ear to pay attention to voice in that way, which was super helpful, but it also meant that I had to concentrate really hard when I was writing because I had to make sure that every single sentence I wrote sounded like it would be spoken in that character's voice, and I was still learning how to get these voices like deep inside my brain. They weren't there yet. I really had to focus for it. So it meant that I was already really in my head when I was writing this first draft, and then I started writing it, and it came about really slowly. And I think because I was really focused on voice and I was reading all of these books about prose, and my first draft prose was not very good, I was starting to second guess myself and not feel good about myself, and it just became really hard for me to write the book. So that was that, and that happened, that stretched on for a little while, and I just did a lot of prose work and didn't actually make a lot of progress in the book. I had a really tough time separating my internal editor and desire to make things better with my knowledge that I just had to get something on the page, even if it wasn't something that was good. And meanwhile, I was also battling this deep, self-conscious voice that was telling me that I actually wasn't very good at writing, and that my prose wasn't measuring up to all of these other people's prose in the books that I was reading and all that kind of stuff. So that was pretty discouraging, and I just found that my productivity just tanked. I went to go visit my parents in the beginning of June, the end of June, and for about 2 weeks, I didn't touch the manuscript at all, and I just did work on character voice, and I read, and I wrote another project, and I just did anything but touch this manuscript. And it wasn't intentional. It wasn't even like I was trying to purposefully take a break from it. It was just that I felt so bad about it that I couldn't bear to look at it, because every time I tried to write, it would just make me feel worse about myself and my progress. So I did pick it back up in July, and I had a bit of a reckoning, because I realized that there was no way I was ever going to get this book written if I didn't just sit down and draft something, even if it was terrible, and that I had to stop writing in my perceived character voices, because I just had to write for plot right now. I couldn't write for voice, because if I'm writing for voice, it just slows me down, and a lot of what's actually happening in the plot isn't going to happen in the final iteration of the plot in the final version of the book. So that was just a waste of time. So then I started actually writing again, and I was getting really productive, and I was hitting my word counts every day, and I was flying through the manuscript, and things were going really well until today. Today is when things kind of hit the fan again, but for this time they hit the fan for a completely different reason. And this is all to say that writing is very weird and different, and the process is always different. I thought that I'd have a very clear process, because I had a clear process for They Whisper, but They Return is proving to be a little bit different, and it's a different book, and my process has to be a little different, and I'm trying to be more open-minded about that instead of beating myself up, because I feel like I should be better at this by now. So what happened today is that I got a better idea for my midpoint than the one that I had a couple of days ago, and I was really jazzed about that. But then I wrote up until the point that I was supposed to write this big midpoint, and there was just this deep feeling in the pit of my stomach, like I didn't want to write it. Like it was boring to me. I just couldn't find any enjoyment out of this scene, and I checked myself and realized that that was not a good thing to be feeling, because if I, the author, was not excited about a scene, the readers definitely won't be. Also, my draft is 70,000 words, and I'm only at the midpoint right now, so that is 20,000 words too long for the Act 1 of my book, which is a problem. So I went back to the drawing board this morning. I was supposed to write. I went away for the weekend, and I didn't write this weekend, so today I was really supposed to buckle down, because yesterday I did admin stuff, and I was gonna write today, but I sat down to write, and I had this crazy big aversion. Like, the last thing I wanted to do was write this stupid midpoint scene, which is supposed to be an exciting climactic scene. And so I wrote down every single thing that happens in the first half of this book. And I realized that the idea that I had for the midpoint really should happen in like Act 1 of the book. It should be the thing that kicks off Act 2, or like that pushes the book from Act 1 into Act 2, or at least it should happen way earlier. And I have two dual heroes' journeys happening in this book, because I have two dual narrators. And so one of them, her midpoint was supposed to be this scene that I was supposed to write today, and the other one has a much more clearly defined midpoint that is very strong and that I am really excited to write. So I think the proposed midpoint in storyline 1 needs to go in way earlier in the book, and then the midpoint for storyline 2 can just stay where it is as the midpoint of the book. because I think that I'll find another way that storyline 1 is going to change during the midpoint, but I think that is my halfway stopping point. And so instead of writing today, I went back to the drawing board and I wrote down everything that needs to happen between my proposed midpoint and what happens right at the beginning of the story. And now I have everything in a list. And as I was doing that, I was realizing that I have a lot of stuff in the first half of the book that I can move to after the midpoint, and I can get to this like exciting scene that picks up the plot way faster. And so now I'm sitting here with a 70,000 word manuscript. Act 2 has not been written. I know Act 2 is exciting. I have been dying to write Act 2 ever since I started writing this book. And I think part of the reason that I haven't been as excited about it is because I'm just stuck in the middle of Act 1, and then this is my gut trying to tell me that something is actually problematic here and that something needs to change. So I think, I'm not going to go on the record saying this, but as I'm filming this video, I think what I'm going to do is figure out how to structure Act 1 so that I am actually excited about it, and then start writing Act 2 after I've already made everything in Act 1 click. Because I have to make sure that I set up everything in Act 2, because I don't want to write the draft all the way to the climax and then have to stop and go backwards like I did with They Whisper. I think I have written everything all the way up to the midpoint, which isn't really the midpoint because this is a 70,000 word draft, which is longer than a lot of books, and it's still super boring. So if you're a They Stay fan, They Return is going well. Yay. It is actually going well. I picked a release date. It's coming out on January 31st, 2023. So there is still a little bit of time before it is released, which is good for me because I need to finish this book. It's good. I'm not going to tell you when I was originally going to release it, but I did push it back because I needed a little bit more time to figure all of this stuff out. And the book is going to be way better for it, and I think I'm going to be way better for it. The book is going to be way better for it because I am actually going to be in a happier place than I was when I was finishing They Whisper, and not super stressed about it. And the book will be better for that. So, yeah, things are looking up. I now have a plan. I have written everything down. I am going to go back and edit Act 1, and that's going to be my project. And yeah, things are good. And if you are a writer who has also struggled with things like this in the past, with writer's block and self-doubt, and feeling bad about yourself when you're writing your first draft, even though all your first draft has to do is exist, that is the place that I lived in my head for the past 3 or 4 months. And now I actually have this draft and I have something to work with. Let me tell you that I'm so glad that I actually have something on the page. And I'm not even thinking about how poorly written it was. I just needed to explore it in order to find out what was working and what wasn't. So I think that the process can be different for every single book that I write and publish. All the processes don't have to be the same, and that is okay, and that's normal, and that's expected. And yeah, you are awesome. Believe in yourself and your writing even when you doubt yourself. Don't let craft books or people tell you that your writing is bad when you are still learning, and especially when you're still drafting and you haven't actually edited your prose yet. Everyone is still learning. I'm still learning. Writing is such an organic process that changes all the time between projects and between stages of life and the way that you as a human develop in the world, and I am just happy that I get to do this and that I have people who are excited to read this book when I finish it. So yeah, that was just a general little update in case anyone was interested. I hope that you enjoyed this little video, and if you did, make sure to like it and subscribe to my channel. I make videos usually about writing tips, but sometimes about writing updates like this one, although I haven't done one of these for a while, but I never want to be a Debbie Downer and talk about my struggles too much because I don't want to be depressing, but I also feel like it's important to both talk about struggles and wins on a channel like this, because I don't want to come up here and say, oh, this is always easy, because I actually rewatched my video when I was struggling with my first draft on writing first drafts, and I'm like watching myself on the screen, and I'm, sitting really tall in my seat, and I'm like, if you get distracted, too bad, you need to finish your draft. And sometimes things are a little more complicated than that. I don't want to sound like I always know all the answers to everything. I'm just doing my best in learning and trying to figure out what works, and telling you when I figure out what works and what doesn't. So What definitely works is finishing your first draft even if it feels terrible. Just keep plowing forward even if it feels terrible. But also know the difference between cringing at the quality of your writing and having a deep, deep-seated feeling in the pit of your stomach that you are completely uninterested in writing this particular scene, because that can honestly be a sign of something being wrong with the scene. Okay, I'm done ranting. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Have a great week, and as always, happy writing.